My group is here to talk about the 2018 US-China trade conflict after 40 years of special protection. The first speaker will be taking you through what a conflict is and the type of conflict. The second speaker will be talking about the parties and main issues. The third speaker will be talking about the effects of the war on other nations. The fourth one, strategies to be used and the role of WTO. And the last one will be talking about the role of the G8 nations and the conclusion of the whole presentation. I am Sepiso, the first speaker. I'll be defining what a conflict is and the type of conflict we figured out in our topic. Whenever two individuals opine in different ways, a conflict is bound to happen. In a layman's language, a conflict is nothing but a fight either between two individuals or a group of people. Conflict is defined as a clash between individuals arising out of a different in thought process, attitudes, understanding, interest, requirements, and even sometimes perceptions. The type of conflict we figured out in our topic is in between two nations, being US and China, meaning that it is an international conflict. The term international conflict refers to a stage of opposition, disagreement, or incompatibility among or between different nations, and also between people and organizations in different nations. I'll be handing over to the next speaker, who will be taking you through the parties and main issues. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yana. I'm telling you the parties involved in this conflict as well as the major causes of this conflict. So the two major parties involved in this conflict were the US and China. And the US, which was led by Trump's administration, decided that it would be in their interests to impart a duty or import tax on goods from China in excess of $34.2 billion. The US further extended this import tax to other countries such as the EU with $7.2 billion there, Canada with $12.88 billion, as well as Mother Russia. The USA's main concern was that China's large trade surplus was causing a depressing factor, meaning that in the US it was harder for people to find jobs in manufacturing, as it was, and it still is, much cheaper to look abroad to countries like Asia for cheap labor. According to a report published in the Washington Post by Zolik in 2017, in order to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States from overseas, the Trump administration decided that they were going to pursue a protectionistic campaign, meaning that they were going to put themselves first and try and put the rest of the countries behind. The concern was that China was using legal and unfair methods to acquire US technology at effectively a discounted price, or for free, basically. In the view of the US, China was consistently and constantly pursuing policies operating within the World Trade Organization's gray areas. These policies would be within gray areas, meaning that they are not regulated, or the rules and regulations that dictate ways that countries should interact are not as clear and defined, so China could find loopholes. That was the US's view. International businesses were often required to share technology for free with the local Chinese government, hence, or else they would lose a market share, as in the Chinese government would demand that any new and innovative technology be shared with them, lest they be cut out of the Chinese market, therefore losing business and ultimately shutting down. As suggested by Rugman in 2016, another possible argument is the emergence of China as well as other economies, which poses a threat to the already established big three economies, one of them mainly being the USA, especially with China set to overtake the US in high-tech industries such as medicine, laboratory sciences, vaccines within the next decade?
Hello, my name is Jafta, and I'll be taking you on the effects of the trade war between US and China. While US was facing these problems, China continued to grow, reaching a record of 419 billion in 2018. The trade war has caused economic pain for both countries and has led to a diversion of trade flows away from both China and US government. As described by Heather Long at the Washington Post, US economic growth has slowed down. Business investment froze. Companies didn't hire many people. Across the nation, a lot of farmers went bankrupt, and the manufacturing, freight, and transportation have hit lows not seen since the last recession. Trump actions have amounted to one of the largest tax increase in years. A September 2019 study by Moody Analytics found that the trade war had already cost US nearly $300,000. 300,000 has cost US 300,000 jobs, an estimated 0.3% of real GDP. Other studies put cost of US GDP at about 0.7%. A 2019 report from Bloomberg Economics estimated about 316 billion by the end of 2020, while modern research from the Federal Reserve Bank of the New York and Columbia University found that the US lost at least 1.7 trillion in the price of their stock as a result of the conflict between US and China from imports, tariffs. Numerous studies have found that US companies primarily paid for US tariffs, with the cost estimated at nearly 46 billion. The tariffs forced American companies to accept lower profit margins, cut wages, jobs, and US workers differ, potentially wage hikers and expansion raise prices for the American consumers and companies. A spokesperson from the American Farm Bureau stated that farmers lost vast majority of what was once 24 billion market in China. As a result, the Chinese retaliatory action. As a result of the Chinese retaliatory actions, this does not mean that China was okay. China also felt economic pain as a result of the trade war, though apparently it was not enough to capitulate to the Trump administration core demands for major structural reform. Indeed, as the trade war dragged on, Beijing lowered its tariffs for its other trading partners as it reduced its reliance on the US market. The final deal for both sides announced in January 15, 2020. This serves as a global warning. A lose-lose trade war is not only harming the main contenders, it harms the surrounding countries. As of the conflict between China and US affected countries like Europe, Mexico, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. It also compromises global economic growth and stability. That's all from me.
Before you is Orat Libagai. I will be presenting to you the methods that are used to solve international disputes. Please note that there is no special order of priority on the methods that I will be presenting about. However, negotiation is the principal means of handling all international disputes. The very first method that I'll be talking about is negotiation. Negotiation is a process whereby two or more parties with different needs and goals discuss an issue to find a mutually acceptable solution. Negotiation is usually always first to be tried out. On occasions where other methods are used, negotiation is not displaced, but rather it is directed towards instrumental issues. This is to say that negotiation has a very important role to play in international disputes. Negotiation is usually conducted through normal diplomatic channels, that is by the respective foreign offices who, in the case of complex negotiations, may lead delegations including representatives of several interested departments of the governments that are concerned. Negotiation is a give and take. Compromises are made to have a successful negotiation. Nations may start off with consultation, just like there's business consultants. So nations may start off with consultation where they ask for professional advice on what is in there for them with the dispute. This is to say it provides a way of solving the dispute by creating an opportunity for adjustment and accommodation. Nations may decide on what to do next using the provided advice and may decide to end the dispute. The unsuccessfulness of the negotiation, however, brings in more methods of solving the disputes. For a negotiation to be possible, the parties must believe that the benefits of an agreement outweigh their losses. Parties must consider whether the issue can be split in such a way that it's a win-win situation where each side obtains satisfaction, or each nation or each party obtains satisfaction. The second method to be discussed is mediation. Mediation is essentially an addition to negotiation, but with the mediator as an active participant, authorized and expected to proceed or facilitate fresh proposals, to interpret and transmit each party's proposals to the other party. Mediation does not apply to all the disputes. There are disputes that can apply mediation as their method for solving the dispute. The other method that I'm going to be talking about is conciliation. Conciliation is an alternative dispute process, an ADR, whereby a third party is appointed as a neutral and unbiased person to help parties in dispute to achieve a settlement by steering negotiations towards a conclusion. So with conciliation, the third party encourages the parties to keep on trying to make a settlement or try to agree to a settlement. There are no rules or any formal procedure to be followed. It normally includes or involves a round table discussion. Once the conciliator has made their recommendation, it is up to the parties whether they decide to take the advices or not. They decide on what to do. and this means that it is not legally binding anyhow. However, if they want to make it legally binding, they have to come to a sort of an agreement and they write it down. The last method that I'm going to be talking about is arbitration. Parties to a dispute present arguments and evidence to a dispute resolution practitioner or arbitrator. Arbitration is a formal process and can follow some similar procedures to court proceedings, where witnesses can be called and they attend the arbitration proceedings or process. The third party reviews facts and merits of a dispute that is presented and argued by both parties involved in the dispute and reach a decision. The decision is binding on the parties and it enforces the decision that is called an award. That is all about the methods of solving the disputes. I will be moving on to the role of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is the only international organization dealing with the global rules of trade. Its main objective or function is to ensure that trade flows as smoothly, predictably, and freely as possible. The functions of the World Trade Organization: monitoring trade policies, administering trade agreements, as well as cooperating with other international organizations. The roles of the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization acts as a tribunal, a conductor, a monitor, as well as a trainer. With the conductor, the WTO ensures that international trade rules are followed and they are respected. With the tribunal role, the WTO settles disputes between its members. It acts as a tribunal where members file complaints against the members who do not follow up the international trade rules. There are stages to dispute settlement. First, disputing countries should try to settle their differences by themselves. And if that fails, we move on to step 2. With step 2, the case is decided by a panel, which issues out a ruling. The ruling may be appealed, but once a definitive ruling has been issued, the losing party must comply, and if they don't comply, there are sanctions that they are liable to. The third role of the World Trade Organization is monitor. Monitor as in it regularly reviews the trade policies of its members to see whether they actually are abiding to the World Trade Organization rules and measure the impact of domestic policies on international trade. The purpose of these reviews is to prevent problems from occurring or from happening. The last role is trainer. The WTO offers training to developing economies. It provides training for government officials such as ministry staff or customs officials. That is all about the roles of trade organizations. Thank you.
Greetings, my name is Warabile and I'll be talking about the Group of 8 and its role in the China trade conflict. So the Group of 8 is an association of 8 highly industrialized countries, namely France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom, Japan, the United States, Canada, and Russia. However, Russia left the group in 2014, which makes them the group of 7 now. So this group meets annually to promote global consensus on issues like economic growth and crisis management, global security, energy, and terrorism. Presidents and prime ministers, as well as the finance and foreign ministers, are willing to openly discuss pressing international issues at the conference. The U.S. Treasury Secretary faced sharp criticism from angry finance ministers of other G7 nations over America's imposition of new tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. And France warned that there could be a trade war in a short period. Meanwhile, the U.S. Commerce Secretary met the Chinese Vice Premier to try to ease trade tensions. Afterwards, China warned all trade talks with the U.S. would be void if Washington introduced sanctions. The state news agency said China was willing to increase imports from many countries, including the U.S. The pressure from the G7 to force China to change its economic behavior was doomed to fail as pressure continued to mount. The group of 7, the United States, Germany, Britain, France, Canada, Italy, and Japan, pledged collective action against harmful industrial subsidies without naming China directly. British Trade Minister as well as the British President had said before the inaugural meeting under the new G7 trade track that it was time for the group to get tough on China and their behavior in the global trading system. There was no joint agreement at the end of the meeting, which was a clear sign of discord. The group of 7 then said they would seek a collective approach to China to counter non-market oriented policies and practices and to ensure a fair multilateral global trade. With the aim of supporting a fair and mutually beneficial global economic system for all people, we will engage others, said the G7 group, the group of 7, especially G20 countries, including large cap economies such as China. As leaders, they said they would consult with each other on collective approaches to address non-market oriented policies and practices, and that they will cooperate with others to address important global issues that impact all countries. They then said they will champion open economies and societies, promote global economic resilience, and it would cooperate on a modernized, freer and fairer, rules-based multilateral trading system that reflects their values and delivers balanced growth with a reformed World Trade Organization at its center. So this just concludes that this conflict between China and US was never resolved, but they are continuing to find ways on how to resolve the conflict. So in conclusion, we would say that conflict is inevitable and conflict is bound to happen as long as people are working together. And in order to avoid conflict, one should first discover what type of conflict that they're dealing with and come up with ways that they can reduce or end the impact of that conflict on their organizations or whatever areas that are affected.